Hello everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how to rewire a Nerf stryfe. We're going to start with the flywheel cage, and we're going to test the polarity of the motors. I'm rewiring this for 2S. The top wheel should be spinning clockwise, the bottom should be spinning counterclockwise. We're going to test this with a 9-volt battery. So I have, when I put them in, most out of darts motors will have these dots on them. So if you reverse the dots, you know they'll be spinning in different directions. Anyway though, so with the positive on the dot and the negative on the it's not so that means that this is going to be the positive, this is going to be the negative. Let me check with the bottom one to make sure. Okay, so the bottom red dot is going to be our positive line. We'll double check this once we've wired it, just to make sure. Next, we're going to cut a little bit of wire. We're going to strip it. Alright, now that I'm done stripping the wire, I'm going to tin both ends, which is just putting a little bit of solder on the tips. Alright, once you got some solder on both ends, we can line. Next, we're going to tin the motor leads. You don't need very much, just enough to cover the very tips of the leads. Alright, now we're going to solder the strip of wire to the motor leads. Remember to heat both the solder and the thing you're trying to solder to. Be careful as the wire can get very hot. Wait about 5 seconds after making your soldering connections to make sure they're secure. And then give it a gentle tug. Next, we're going to take a pair of pliers. Next, we're going to take a pair of pliers and bend this wire down. Alright, now we're going to do our other soldering connection. We're going to Alright, next we're going to make our other soldering connection. Alright, wait 4 to 5 seconds for it to cool. Then give it a tug. Alright, next we're going to solder the negative line. Strip both ends of the wire. A pair of helping hands is helpful but not necessary. Alright, again we're going to tin the motor leads. Alright. You may need to add a little bit extra solder if it's not connecting. Be careful not to add too much or else you'll have a bad connection. Now wait 4 to 5 seconds for it to cool, then give it a gentle tug. Alright, now we can do the other connection. Alright, wait for it to cool now. test the connection. Alright, now, once it's cooled all the way off, we're going to see if we wired it up right. And don't use your LiPo for this, but we're going to make sure we wired everything up correctly and attempt to shoot a dart. I'm using a 9.6 volt NIHM. Alright, now that we know it works, we can solder into the rest of the gun. Alright, we're going to remove everything, all of the internals. We'll add back some stuff later. We can just snip these two wires. This one already came off. And then all these electronics, you can just discard all this. Unless you plan on reusing the flywheel cage, the wheels. Although I'm using upgraded cage. Alright, now we get to the fun part. We're going to solder everything into the blaster. Alright, we're going to start with the easiest line, which is the negative line. Which, we're just going to run from our cage out of the blaster. That's it. Take a bit of wire, measure it out. If you're using a stock battery, you're going to need to make it a little longer, but I plan on using the original battery housing. So, we're going to need to cut it about here. Strip both ends. Go ahead and tin both ends of this wire. Make sure it's evenly spread out around all the wire. Then, alright, now that it's cooled, we're going to solder to, let me see. Alright, we're going to solder to this end of the top end of the, we're going to solder to the top end of the flywheel, motor, onto the same motor lead. Alright, wait a couple seconds for it to cool. Give it a gentle tug. Alright, now we'll see how it fits in. You will need to, using some flush cutters, clip out these little ribs, as they will get in the way of your new motors. Alright, now that we've done that, we're going to see how the new wiring fits. You might also need to widen this groove for your wire if you're using thicker wiring. Alright, now let's see how our cage fits. Alright. That looks like it fits pretty well. Now we can go on to soldering the positive line, which is a bit more complicated. Let's right now go ahead and start soldering on our XT60 connector, as now is the easiest time to do it. We're gonna cut. I'm actually going to use a drill for this step. Also can, taking some flush cutters and a pair of pliers, just yank out all these motor leads. No need to be careful, these are garbage. All the leads out. We can just, using a rotary tool or some flush cutters, you can just make everything look pretty. Make sure there's no sharp edges to poke your LiPo or whatever battery you're using. If you need additional space, you can 3D printer purchase a extended battery cover, which will allow you to use bigger LiPos. Since I'm only using a 2S, that won't really be necessary. But if you're using a 3S, that'd probably be best. You also can Dremel out this area, which I'm not going to do because I'm only using a 2S. But again, if you were using a 3S, that'd be helpful. Next, using a drill or a Dremel with a router bit, you're going to drill a hole right about here. I've placed down a towel to ensure that I don't go through my table, but this is not necessary if you feel confident with your skills. Alright, now I've got a hole for my wires to go through. I'm going to sand it down a bit to make sure there's nothing pokey for my battery. Alright, now that we got that relatively smooth, we can begin the more complicated part of the process. All right, now that we got the negative end through here, we're going to, we can remove this towel. All right, before we do any soldering, we're going to want to take a little bit of heat shrink, cut it, and slide it over the wire. Now we can begin the soldering process. So we're going to put a bit of solder inside the hole on the negative end of the XT60. What we're doing is we're kind of creating a little well of solder that then we can, I'm actually going to use my helping hands for this. That we can kind of dip the wiring into. That's not going anywhere. But just in case, still give it a tug when you're done. Then you can slide your heat shrink over and heat it up with the side of your soldering iron. Now that we got that good and down, we can work on the positive end, which is the more complicated end. And we're going to cut a bit of wire. We'll measure it out first, just in case. It's going to need to come from this switch down here, through this, and then into the battery. All right, we'll go with right here. Then we're going to strip both ends again. All right, now we continue the other end. And then this time we're going to be starting at the XT60 connector. So we're going to run this wire through the hole we made. Alright, now we're going to, again, fill this little lead full of solder. Might have actually done a little too much there. But, alright, then we're going to, alright, let's let that cool. Alright, so now we can begin soldering the switch. I'm using a 21 amp Omron clone for my switch. Alright, so next we're going to solder the switch. So we're going to take the wire coming from the battery compartment, and we're going to solder it to the normally open on the switch, which if you're using an Omron or Omron clone like me, will be this one if it's not labeled. The one closest to the common, which is this one. So we're going to tin that connection. Alright, wait for it to cool, test the connection. Then alright, now we're gonna solder the final wire, which is just positive wire going from common on the switch to the final motor lead. So we can measure out a bit of wire. We'll start at the switch for our connection. Then we'll work our way up to the motors. Alright, now with luck, this will be our last soldering connection. Although something breaks during testing, we may need to resolder something. Alright, now that we have it back assembled, we're going to hook up the battery and test it one more time before reassembling. Alright, now we can reassemble it. Alright, now that we're all reassembled, you're ready to go. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.